what's something that you've learned in the last 5 years?
Uh, Geez, I'm always learning things, but the learning opportunities are smaller and more minute now. It's not huge things, right? So I learned little things about bedding and stuff. I think one of the biggest takeaways in the last 5 years would have been when I started doing camera studies on bedding. I don't like putting cameras on buck beds because it really influences them. They get scared to hell when you do things
Mhm.
in their bedding areas, and they know those cameras are there. I don't know if they smell them or what, but you even put them way up in a tree and you get the deer walking and looking up at it.
Yeah.
They're, so I like to keep them out of the beds, but for a short period, I got a whole bunch of cameras from Exodus, and then I had some other people get involved and use their cameras, and we put cameras in bedding areas for like a whole year and stuff, and really studied the deer, and took some of my assumptions and some of the things that I've observed and really locked them in as this is reality because now I've got factual information. And some of the things I learned was that these bucks have peak periods that they use their bedding areas. So there's like a 2 week window for most bedding areas that those deer, if it's a good bedding area, that deer's most likely there. And we always already knew that multiple bucks use these bedding areas. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. They think they find a bedding area, it's one buck. It's not. If it's a good spot, all the big bucks use it. But you find out that there, with these cameras, we found out that there's some bedding areas that never hold anything older than 2 years old. They just don't have the ingredients or whatever for protection, and the mature bucks just don't bed there. But that 2 week window was really important because that really locked in the timing of hunting that at the exact right time.
Mm.
So, one thing I noticed in some of these spots was for a 2 week period, of 14 days, my target buck might be in a bedding area, let's say 7 times, so 50% of the time. And the rest of the year, the odds are like 1 in 50.
Wow.
So hitting that timing correct. So that really set me on a path of really being more of the detective. You see more of that out of me now, where I really go into a bedding area and try to figure out exactly when that buck is there, based on the sign he leaves behind,
Yeah.
and the things you find there. So that was one of the biggest key takeaways. Another thing was I always thought that those mature bucks would lay in a bed for hours and hours, and they don't. They move quite frequently. They stay in the bedding area, but they'll get up and they'll eat a little bit and bed down a little bit further over. And it seems like there's key periods of time in the day when they do that. Like when the sun comes up and starts getting hot, something changes thermally and they move to a different bed. The thermals and the air currents change, they move.
Yeah.
And midday when the sun's blaring bright down, they'll move to another bed that's more in the shade. And in the evening when the thermals start changing again, they move again before they get up. So they
Wow.
move constantly like that, and they might be in a bed for. I think some of the ones we've seen some in these studies that were in a bed for 6 or 7 hours, and that was actually the extreme.
Wow.
Um, Most of them would be in a bed for an hour or two, and sometimes you'd see 3 hours, but not long, and then they'd move. And if you had a camera over a bed, a lot of times you wouldn't see where they go. And I think a lot of people would assume they leave the area, but I don't think so. They just move over to a different bed in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
But those were some of the things I learned from that camera study, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, I really don't recommend if somebody's trying to kill a deer that they put a camera in a bedding area because it had a real negative impact on those bedding areas and on the deer.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of ruined some of those areas, but I did it in the name of learning.
Yeah.
So for a hunter wise, you'd be way better off putting that camera, back 100 yards from the bed or 75 yards from the bed where you hunt, rather than in that bedding area because they're a little more tolerant outside of that bedding area of things like that.
Yeah. Hey guys, we're going to get to your questions here in 1 second, but I got one of my own first. So that's the advantage of where my spot. I get to ask my question first. Last question, because I'm just curious. I think it was, maybe a video you released recently. Oh, maybe it was the top 12. which is a fantastic video, man. So was the Swamp Bible, man. That thing was so good. Okay, it was on one of those, and you said something I've never heard you say before, or at least I've never caught it. Something about this buck going in, maybe because it was snowing, you were able to tell this. It was going in, and you could tell it was checking, almost like checking that ridge to see where was the best wind at. Talk a little bit more
Mhm.
about it. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, when I see, I'll track deer a lot in the snow,
Yeah.
and I'll follow their footprints, especially mature bucks, and that teaches me a lot.
Mm.
Now, where they bed in winter doesn't help me a lot in the fall because the bedding changes. Usually, like when we're looking in spring, we're looking at the bedding areas that they were bedding in back in fall. But beyond that, what I'm talking about is following those deer tracks just to learn their behaviors and where they go and stuff. And what I started seeing was these bucks would, you're following it, and that, he's kind of got a beeline going. One of the interesting things was it wasn't going by any trees, and this is several bucks I did this with.
Mm.
But as soon as it gets near bedding, it starts wandering around a little more and starts going into bedding areas. And I know these bedding areas where I'm pulling these deer. I've been in them a million times.
Yeah.
I've got setups for them and stuff. And you watch this deer going in, and you're like, okay, he's going to bed down. And you watch him go right to an exact worn in bed, stand in that bed like he's going to lay down and not lay there. His footprints are move around in that bed. You could tell he was standing there looking to lay down.
Yeah.
And then right out of that bed, over 50 yards to the next bed, stand in there for a little while, look around, and stand in the position he'd be in the bed with the wind to his back, but then not bed there, move to another bed, maybe in between those two, and then finally bed down.
Man, that's
So
just fascinating.
that wasn't just once, that was time after time after time again.
Yeah.
And if you start following deer in snow, you'll see this. As long as you know how to recognize what a bed is,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see them go into these beds and then move to another bed and then move to another bed and then finally bed. And
Yeah.
I believe what they're doing is checking wind currents, or they're checking for the safety of that bed. But obviously, if they've bedded there before, which they have, if they know where that bed is and they went beeline right to it,
Mm-hmm.
they're checking something that's specific to right now, which I think is wind. It's
Yeah.
probably the way the air currents are flowing, because I think a lot of their bedding is based on smell,
Yep.
on scenting danger. So that
Yeah.
was very interesting for me.
Yeah, man. When you brought that up in one of those videos, or maybe it was on a live stream, I can't remember. Hey, you guys, if you guys aren't tuning into the Hunting Beast live streams on Tuesdays at 8, you should do it. They're great. Okay, let's jump to these questions here. We got some folks here and asking questions. Kurt, thanks for being here, man. Kurt says, "Hi Dan, my question for tonight is, what would be your favorite terrain feature that you find that gets you most excited?"
Hi, Kurt. How's it going? For me, it varies. So that's not a cop out; it's the truth. So I like marshes and swamps early season, and I like hill country and rut, and I like farm country in late season. And the reason for that is in swamps and marshes, it's real thick. I can get real close. I can get within that window of movement in early season, and really have a lot of success. Early season in marshes, if there's acorns, they're isolated. The deer aren't bedding in the acorns; they have to travel to them. And you can use those as like little food plots. There's not many people out there. Most people won't fight the mosquitoes and the bugs and the water to your balls crap, and go hunt these islands and stuff. And I'll go out there and I'll get pristine hunts. So now when rut comes along, it's hard to kill those deer in marshes and swamps when they just run in the cattails and chase and stuff. And it's really hard to get movement in a spot where you want to kill them. But when you get into the hills, they pretty much stick to leeward sides where they can, get that wind over the top, smell from the bottom with the thermals, and you can read it like a map and know right where to go. So hill country just works out really good for rut for me. And late season, deer will congregate around food. In an open type farm country, you can spot them deer from a ways. You can see the tracks in the snow or whatever, and you have to go a long distance of no deer once you get into that real late winter stuff. But you'll find them congregated, and and the bucks will be on a really good pattern around food sources, which are pretty much locked down into spots in farm country.
So you're telling me you don't like big woods for late season? Man, that's what I'm stuck with here. I'm in South Carolina, and it's big woods, and it's real big. And man, late season is just. I mean, I seriously get to every December, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I need to start fishing in December. That's good stuff. Okay, let's see here. We got several. Rich, what's up, man? He says, "Hey Dan, would you ever hunt on the windward side of a ridge? If so, why?"
Yeah. Hi, Rich. Yes, I would hunt on the windward side because that's where the deer are going. I'm going to go wherever the deer are going when they leave their beds. There are cases too when they bed on the windward side. They don't just bed on leeward. Leeward is just most common. So they'll bed in hill country just like they do in farm country. They'll bed up against a thick area, on a transition. They'll bed, like they do in swamps. I mean, they'll find a little pothole somewhere and bed low. So they don't just bed on leeward sides. It's just that leeward is the most common bedding in hill country, right? But I don't necessarily hunt on the leeward side. I go and I find that bedding, or I guess where that bedding is, one of the two, depending on whether I've scouted it before. And I look for the trails coming out of that. And my goal is to get on the deer's exit trail from his bedding and be along that trail as close as I can possibly get without being seen, smelled, or heard. And that's where I'm setting up. And it doesn't matter to me where that is or what hill it's on, or if it's low, it's high, it's to the side. It's just a matter of that I'm on that exit trail as close as I can get. Sometimes it's 75 yards, sometimes it's 200.
Yeah, Rich, man, if you don't have Dan's Hill Country DVD, just go get it. Like you won't regret it, and you'll watch it 14 times by the end of the week. So I'm telling you, it's really good. That was great. Benjamin, he says, Dan, have you ever hunted a property? Oh, we got more questions coming now. I got to stay on that one. Dan, have you ever hunted a property with plenty of walking, biking trails on it? I know you talk about hunting overlooked property that hunters don't have much confidence in. I scouted a property last week that had a lot of hiking and biking trails, but very little hunter sign.
Yeah, I hunt stuff like that all the time. I think of that as more like suburban hunting. That's what I would call that. I've hunted a lot of conservancies that you apply for. There's one that I would do work for to hunt. You go cut invasive species, and the tree huggers will let you hunt for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have hiking trails through the woods where they can, hug bunnies and stuff. And they'd stick to their trails and walk through there. And it was interesting. There were some differences, but the differences you see also relate to all the other properties I hunt. It's just you see it more when it's more specific to heavily used trails. So one of the things I learned about that was that I could hunt spots more than once if I hunted right along the trail.
Mm.
I had a lot of reoccurring where the same buck would get out of the same bedding area and come through the same way over and over again, even if I hunted there, because they're so used to human scent on that trail, and so used to crossing that trail that I could hunt there. But if I would hunt 50 yards off that trail and they smelt where I was, they'd freak.
Yeah.
But they could come by, and the day I walked up the tree, walk right across my scent trail and not even react.
Mm-hmm.
As long as my stand was right above the trail. And, there's also the plus, you get to wave at all the bunny huggers walking by.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have a great story for that. I've told it on the show before. This was like right when I got into the beast world. And so I was testing a lot of stuff, and like everything just kept proving itself to be right. I think this was maybe a month before season came in. I was out scouting this new little piece of public down from the house, and I was walking in, and everything's super grown up and thick and nasty. It was a lot, like it was like a lot for homes that never got developed. So it was just super thick and nasty, which was great. And I'm walking this road bed in. I'm still putting the keys in my pocket, like I'm not far from the truck at all, and I'm just going to check the edges of the property lines basically. And I'm walking in, and I cut this track as I'm putting my keys in my pocket. I cut this track, and I keep walking, and I'm like, you know what? that was kind of a bigger track, and it looked kind of fresh. So I back up, and all this stuff, I mean, it's like a rainforest to my left, just super thick and nasty, timber to my right. And I look down at this track, and I look over to where it's going into the woods, and I'm like, man, okay, like maybe there's a bed. That's the only reason something maybe would be right here. And Dan, I took 2, maybe 3 steps off of that trail, and it bounded up and took off. It was totally fine letting me. So actually, there's a cooler part of the story. It takes off, and I'm like, my heart's jumping out of my chest. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was right there. I mean, it was 7 yards off the road, if that. And it ran off, and I got myself together, and I walk over, and I see this bed. Like it was the most beautiful thing. And I sit down in the bed, and because I like back then I was still just learning all this stuff. And I sat down in the bed, and I could see the top of my truck. And I was like, that thing was gonna let me. It heard me park. It saw me walking by, and as long as I stayed where I was supposed to stay, he was totally fine with that. And I took seriously maybe a maximum of 3 steps off into the area, the no-go zone, and he bolted. And I was like, how many bucks have I walked by my whole life? It blew my mind. That stuck with me
Yeah.
for such a long time.
I got so many success stories over that exact same scenario. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority of the absolute giants I shoot are usually right under everybody's noses and something that they would never dream of hunting.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. You can check out the rest of this interview and over 50 hours of additional expert hunting content over at huntbetter.us. Check out the link in the description. Hope to see you there. Hunt harder, hunt smarter.